Hello, cosmic beings out there. I'm Mannah, a therapeutic astrologer and interviewer. I'm passionate about learning and sharing insights on how to live a better life. I hope you'll stick around as I infiltrate the minds of thought leaders, authors, and healers from around the globe. Wherever you find yourself right now, dear listener, I want you to remember that you have a place to call whole. Now, please enjoy this episode. All right, welcome everyone. Let's tap into cosmic order, world, soul, and the history of the idea of time, or maybe something else, but whatever we're going to talk about today. At least I know that it's all just going to be footnotes to Plato. So with those words, I'll welcome Matthew David Segall, who's a PhD, transdisciplinary researcher, writer, teacher, and philosopher. Welcome, Matt.
Good to be here with you. Yeah, I was excited to receive the invitation.
Yeah, so I do have my first question for you, because when I invited you, it was just because, yeah, I'm going to come back to that. Just the philosophy, I'm so drawn to it. And I love your podcast, Footnotes to Plato. But then, well, now that I've been preparing and going through your videos, and also you sent me this article, and I wonder, are you an astrologer?
Mm. Well, I mean, not professionally, and I wouldn't say that I'm even an expert, but I have studied with Richard Tarnas and learned a bit of his archetypal astrological perspective. And so I do track my transits and I have studied my own chart and my biography looking at past transits and so on. But I'm very much a student, I would say, of astrology, and whether or not I count as an astrologer, I don't know. That's for other people to decide. But I definitely value it as a um, an interpretive art, a method of divination, and a means of orienting myself in time, but time as something qualitative, not just quantitative, not just what clocks measure, but something that has a deeper texture to it, right? And I think astrology has proven invaluable to me as a means of becoming sensitive to the texture of time, right? We maybe we feel that in the seasonal changes, and astrology, I think, deepens our appreciation for the rhythms of time even more than just paying attention to the shift in the light and the temperature and the weather and stuff through the course of a year. Astrology lets us go many layers deeper than just that awareness. Yeah.
For sure. There's so much to track all the time, and you have to, I think, choose which transits to care about, because you can get really nerdy and really detailed about what is going on all the time. But that's really interesting to me to hear. So it's, you say that astrology has been invaluable to you, and yet you're not an astrologer in that sense, that you do readings for people and like
Right.
that. So is it, maybe we can compare it to being a philosopher, where, I don't know, could that be the same? It's like you're a philosopher because you've studied philosophy for a long
Hmm.
time, for an extended time, right?
Right.
And whether you teach it, whether it's your work, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the ancient world, it wouldn't be uncommon for philosophers to be aware of uh, astrology and to take astrology seriously. And so, in some sense, I'm just um, harkening back to that earlier period, before the scientific revolution, when astrology was just considered to be one of the disciplines that anybody who wanted a well-rounded knowledge of the universe would study, So, um, but yeah, I don't feel like I have the expertise required to read somebody else's chart. I feel like that's um, a responsibility that requires more study than I have. But like I said, I have found it to be an important source of orientation for myself.
And you do have a lot on your plate anyway. I
Yeah.
mean, just whoa, you have written so much and there's so much good stuff out there. I really feel like just I want to honor that, how much you send out into the world. Just
Thank
up
you.
until now, we are born in the same year. So
Mm.
just up until now, and hopefully we have the rest of our life ahead of us. So so that's tremendous. Isn't it kind of I'm not even with my questions yet. I'm just curious to hear if you feel it's kind of a special life you are leading. Do you notice that compared to others?
I feel that I've been blessed in many ways. I get to do what I love for a living. I don't even consider it work. It's play most of the time. There's the occasional administrative meeting that is work, but mostly it's play. And I'm really grateful that I'm able to do as much writing and communicating as I do and that people are receptive to it. Yeah, it's a real gift. And I hope I can keep doing it for, 40, 50 more years.
Yeah. 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 I mean, because it's so valuable to have that out here. And I feel like the comparison with astrology is kind of there still because astrology is also spread out to anyone, right? And then you can go deep into it or just know about it. So a lot of people will know about Aristotle and Plato and but not being able to do a lecture on it, of course.
Mhm. Right. Or people know just their sun sign
Yeah,
and don't have a sense for how deep it goes.
exactly. Yeah. Okay, so I read this article about time, about um, minding time in an archetypal cosmos. It's just one of the many things that you've written.
Mhm.
And I just want to say there's a little spoiler alert here because I want to go to the last quote of the whole article, right? Because I think we could talk a long time about even just that quote. And it is if we hope to reinvent ourselves by bringing forth a more cosmologically grounded and ecologically embedded civilization, turning again to the heavens for our sense of timing is a crucial first step.
Mm.
Yeah. So I have a couple of questions for this. Are you ready? I'm just gonna send them out there so you can answer however you
Okay.
want to. So what does it mean to be cosmologically grounded? And how do you view the need to reinvent ourselves? And do you mean the planet or do you mean humans psychologically when you talk about reinvention? And this article is also about that, this
Hmm.
new coming in. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in the context of this article on the nature of time, and the ways that different historical epochs have understood the nature of time, by reinvent ourselves, I'm speaking at the cultural level. Um, but it's not like our individual psyche is separate from the collective psyche. Culture is the collective psyche, and there's always a intimate connection between the two. And so to reinvent ourselves culturally, by coming back into a relationship to to the stars and planets would also involve a major psychological transformation for each of us as individuals. But I think it's something that we have to do together, because really, what I'm trying to point to there at the end of this article is the need for um, a new calendar, or if not a new calendar, then at least recovering older calendars, and considering the ways in which, the Gregorian calendar that, in the West is how we track time nowadays is maybe too artificial. And we could find other ways of tracking time that made it more apparent to us that we're embedded within this larger, I'll call it an organism, the solar system and the galaxy. These are, um, I would say, living living beings that we are embedded within, right? And so um, we're nested in these larger rhythms of life, right? Our own bodies, the ecosystem, the Earth as a whole, or Gaia, the whole solar system, the galaxy, and then that nesting probably continues beyond even our Milky Way galaxy. And our calendar is a way of tracking the changing dynamics and relationships between these different organisms that we're embedded within. And so I think one of the things that's gone wrong with our modern Western civilization is that we've become disconnected and severed from the life rhythms of the cosmos. Um, and if we want to be more ecologically attuned, and if we want to ground our own sense of life rhythm, the day-night cycle, and our circadian rhythm in some larger story, we need help. Um, we need to engage in a project of um, reinvention at the level of our cultural means of tracking time, right? Uh, like we still have holidays, we still have to be aware of the seasons, but because we're so insulated, many of us live in cities, we can't even see the stars at night. We have air conditioning or heaters, so we're protected from these seasonal changes in a way that I think obviously makes us more comfortable on one level, but also I think contributes to our sense of alienation. Um, and so we've ended up in a situation where we think meaning is something like we each have to invent for ourselves, which I think we do have a role to play in participating in the construction of meaning. But if we can come back into a meaningful relationship like the way that astrology allows us to with these rhythms of time beyond us, then all of a sudden we have help in the construction of meaning. It's not just subjective. The whole cosmos is conspiring to aid us in the creation of meaning, right? And so I think, yeah, that last sentence is just pointing out, I think, how um, something we all take for granted most of the time, the calendar, is actually a profound, I'll use this word, psychotechnology, a technology of the soul that we can pay more attention to as a means of revitalizing our whole civilization and renewing our sense of meaningful participation in the cosmos.
Yeah, you're not afraid of the big words and the big concepts. Right. So, okay. Okay, so I'm just gonna not ask something practical around calendars. That's gonna be too boring. But let me ask you about, so in the beginning of this article, you have some quotes and you say that we don't even know what time is.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, I guess I am asking about this dichotomy, this split between the abstract and then when we take it into something very concrete and talk about a calendar and how to organize our lives after something linear. Okay, try and answer without me. I don't even know what my question is.
Yeah. Well, time is very mysterious. And, we encounter its mystery when we try to deal with time zone conversions, or daylight savings. We have to move the clock back an hour or ahead. And many people are under the impression that when we do that, they're actually losing an hour out of the day, but they're not really. It's just we're changing how we track time, like the way we measure. And so, but we get confused about this because time is so intangible. Um, it turns out, it can't actually be measured by clocks, but clocks and calendars are extremely useful. Then let me explain what I mean by that.
Mm.
Time is no two moments are ever the same, right? Like time moves in an irreversible direction. We grow older day by day, unfortunately, or fortunately, maybe if you think we get wiser as we age. But the point is, we're never the same person twice.
Yeah.
And yet the calendar repeats every year as though, you're just adding another year in um, accumulation of numbers. But real time is a living process. It's more like an organism that's growing, just like us. And we can, for the sake of convenience, put a number on it. Uh, but that convenience, I think, often fools us into thinking we understand what time is, right? We know how to navigate through time because we have clocks and calendars. But what are we navigating through? It's very mysterious. And many philosophers have remarked that when we're just trying to coordinate timing so that we can both arrive at the lunch we planned at the right time tomorrow, we don't ask these questions. But when we stop to really consider what is time, uh, it's among the most mysterious questions that we can ask. And I don't think we dwell on that enough. And I
What?
don't know what it is. I don't know what, this article is just my attempt to offer some um to explore time from the perspective of these different symbols or
Mm,
these Greek concepts of Chronos. I mean, they're gods as well. Chronos, Kairos, Aeon,
mm,
uh, as a symbolic, intuitive way of understanding the different ways that time can show up for us. But ultimately, it remains quite mysterious to me.
mm. Yeah. And yet you say that's what we can use astrology for, to track these cycles of
Right.
time. I mean, yeah.
Right.
I guess it's really difficult to imagine they're not, I mean, not trying to organize your existence and your experiences according to something, right?
Mm. Yeah. But I think the organizing time according to astrological cycles um, is a more concrete way of relating to time because we're actually basing time not on a mechanical clock that we've invented,
Okay, like,
but
mm,
we're basing it on the movement of these real, these planetary beings,
mm,
these spheres with their, yeah, they have regular rhythms, but it's like rather than building an artificial clock,
mm,
we're relating to the cosmic clock that we're inside of already. And it's not a clock that works with just numbers. I mean, obviously, we need geometry to help us track the planets, but there's a qualitative nature to each of these planetary cycles that is, I think, more accessible to us at an embodied level, more at the level of our imagination, whereas clocks and calendars um, are merely numbers,
mm.
right? They don't have that deeper quality that each planet has, or the houses, or the signs, and so on.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. I'm getting insights as you speak.
Hmm.
I'm thinking first I thought of, okay, yeah, but also the female cycle, right? That are not,
Yeah.
it's not being something that you don't regard that as anything when you have a job. You just have to come at the same hour no matter if you're bleeding or not. So there's that natural cycle, and then also the thing about astrology's time is about meaning, right? There's a meaning to
Hmm.
every minute, if you will. There's a meaning in it. And so when you're talking about our invention, it's more mechanical and it's just a standard, it's just the same.
Hmm. Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. And I love that connection to, the menstrual cycle because that's a great example of how our civilization totally ignores natural rhythms and imposes this artificial clock time that totally backgrounds or belittles or marginalizes these real rhythms that constitute, who and what we are as living organisms. So a healthier civilization, I think, would allow us to emphasize these natural rhythms more so than the artificial rhythms of the clock. But
Mm.
we've become slaves to the clock
Mm.
and to all machines, really, but especially to the clock.
I mean, so you are an Aquarius, so I would really love to hear your vision. And we already talking about it, the civilization and your cosmology. It's also Aquarian, and I have a deep respect for that quality. And even, I mean, especially when I see it lived out the way that you do. I can talk more about your astrology later. I almost cannot help myself from going there. But first, just talking, I would like to know, what do you think? What is going to emerge from this crisis we are in
Mm.
as a civilization now? And
Mm.
what are your visions? Do you get my
Yeah.
question? Like, what could, because I think you have like a future sense. You can sense something that other people can't yet. That's what I'm
Mm.
projecting onto you anyway.
Well, I think we're going through a difficult time as a civilization right now, and I know Aquarians are supposed to be idealistic, but I think it might get worse before it gets better. Um, you know, to understand the future, I think it's important to understand the recent past at least. And it seems to me that much of the growth in the last century and a half or so, both in terms of population, in terms of the growth of the economy, the tremendous advances in technology, um, I think a lot of this is a function of what is called the petroleum interval. I think it's Rob Hopkins who came up with that term. He's the founder of the transition town movement, which is this attempt to relocalize and scale things down a bit because the industrial civilization has set things up in such a way that we imagine we can continue to grow economically and in population uh, indefinitely into the future. And I think that is an unrealistic expectation. And so the future, instead of things just getting bigger and faster and better, I think is going to involve some degree of contraction, coming back down to earth in a way, learning how to live more simply, but not necessarily more, not necessarily in a way that wouldn't be fulfilling and meaningful and enriching and nourishing. I think there are ways of uh, transforming our technologies to be less resource intensive and more ecologically attuned so that we can continue to live well, but on a smaller scale, using less energy, being more, something as simple as being more in tune with the diurnal cycle, the day-night cycle. Like we use all this electricity now when the sun sets, which is very bad for our circadian rhythms. And it's like we're trying to fight against these natural rhythms around us through the imposition of um, technologies. I don't, not that I hate electricity, I think it's wonderful, but there are ways that we can, I think, scale back and come back into tune with the world around us. And um, many people who are very excited by technological advances and whatnot uh, might feel resistance to this vision of the future of a more simple lifestyle. Um, but I think we'd actually be happier and more fulfilled if we didn't let the machines and the what is efficient for machines drive everything about our lives, where it's like we become human beings and the natural world become an afterthought if they're given any consideration at all. And all of our motivation is towards like making the machines more efficient and redesigning the earth and redesigning our lives so that the machines can work better. And why are we doing that? And so I have, despite being an Aquarian who does find technology to be fascinating, I think we can reassess the role that technology plays in our lives, um, and miniaturize it in various ways so that it's not so that the machines don't feel like a cage that we're locked inside of, but rather miniaturize the technologies and allow, you know, the green spaces to grow back and to really inhabit the earth with a lighter footprint. Um, but I think to get to that place of a more ecological society, it's going to require uh, a period of downsizing, say, that's going to be painful because the way our economy works and the people that are in power right now do not want this kind of downsizing or degrowth, as it's sometimes called. And so it's going to happen not because we carefully plan it out, uh, but unfortunately, I feel like it's going to happen because of some cataclysm, some catastrophe that brings the whole industrial economy to a standstill and forces us to simplify. And I don't say that lightly. I don't say that because I'm excited about it, but I feel like we're on the verge of um, a collapse, and there's lots of hubris about, how we can just continue to grow and advance technologically, and AI is going to solve all our, well, it's either going to solve all our problems or kill us all. It depends who you ask. Um, but I feel like there's a lot of hubris now where we imagine technology can solve all our problems, and I just don't think that's the case.
Mm.
So, not as, I mean, there's hope at the end of the tunnel, but I
Mm.
feel like the tunnel will contract before we get there. Yeah.
I have many questions. I have many questions for you. Okay. So, apropos, when you just said depends who we ask about the AI,
Yeah.
does there exist philosophers who don't say something to this extent, like you said? I mean, is it because you come from a certain kind of philosophy school, because you're a humanist or whatever? Or is it because when you've studied philosophy and history, then then you can actually see what's going on with a different eye? Do you get my question?
Yeah, I mean, um, I try to read widely and expose myself to the opinions of those who I disagree with. I find it boring to agree too much with people. I want, there to be friction because that's where I think new ideas are generated. And um, but yeah, I think there are some philosophers who would say that we're moving into a period where AI and robotics and these technological advances are going to free up a lot of human time for us to stop working so much and do other things, make art, hang out, do whatever. And I can see the possibility there, but the problem is the the capitalist economy that is uh, financing the creation of the AI and all the robots and stuff has no interest in making those technologies beneficial to humanity. It has an interest in making profit. And so there's a conflict of interest here in terms of moving towards a society where fewer people have to work because of robotics versus moving to a society where the rich get even richer and the poor get even poorer because of the ways that these technologies are even more efficient at extracting wealth from us. And so I'm less utopian about the impact that these new technologies will have. Um, and we're the average person who is not a computer engineer or is not a major shareholder in some company, and um, the average person uses these technologies and they seem to operate like magic. Like we all have a computer in our pocket that's more powerful than way more powerful than the computers that put astronauts on the moon, in the 60s. Um, we have access to the whole history of knowledge in our pocket. And it's amazing. But what's going on behind the scenes to make that possible? Um, well, there are, first of all, we're being bathed in electromagnetic radiation from all the cell phone towers. And I'm not, rushing to a conspiracy about that electromagnetic radiation does to us, but it's got to do something to us. I mean, and then we have these giant server farms, uh, gigantic buildings full of computers that have to be cooled with massive amounts of water, and they need their own power plants because they're so energy hungry. And that's a very unsustainable situation, right? And so all this AI, it's not just working like magic in the cloud. It's powered by very energy intensive machines. And where's all that energy coming from? Um, it's not it's not a renewable resource. So I think there are limitations here that are hidden from the view of the average user of these technologies. But when you really consider everything going on behind the scenes, it seems less magical. I mean, it's still impressive that these things work at all, but there's a lot of infrastructure behind the scenes that makes this all possible, and it's not energetically sustainable as far as I can tell.
I see. Yeah. Yeah, my mind is both simultaneously, but I'm used to that, simultaneously on your birth chart and on what you're saying. That's my normal. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
that's my normal, that I have that chart.
I'd be interested in any connections
Would
you're
you?
seeing. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I almost can't keep it in, but I also want to ask you about stuff that you know. But it's just that all of those Aquarian planets are in the eighth house.
Mm.
And do Tanis even use house systems? I don't remember if he's one of those who don't use houses even.
Not very much, but I've picked up a little bit. I mean, I understand the eighth house because of the modern correlation with Pluto,
Yeah.
uh, or Scorpio, so
Yeah,
um,
so it's that seeing in the dark, and you were talking about from hidden view. I mean, that's exactly it.
mm,
That you are able to, like, all that, because you were saying I'm supposed to be an idealist, but and I'll be like, well, actually, it's in that eighth house, so that's less idealist for sure, because it's about deconstruction, is a good word for it, deconstruction.
right.
So not necessarily destruction, but deconstruction, right? There's also the build up in it. Um, and but of course, you would need to go to those dark places. Um, and I'm always trying to find a balance here when I talk about astrology, because I don't want to neglect what you're saying and then just talk about something else. But it's, from my point of view, it's what you tap into. So it's a special skill that you have. In this case, a vision that you have, um, to see everything from that point of view. So it's a help,
Hmm.
um, for everyone. I mean, yeah. Uh,
Hmm. Yeah, no, I hadn't made that connection before. I appreciate that.
mm,
Yeah. Um, mhm. Yeah, before I studied philosophy, I actually was considering being an investigative journalist,
ah,
uh, because I
great.
wanted to, expose the corruption behind the scenes.
Yes, exactly, behind the scenes, the corruption, yes, and the, what is it called, the misuse of power. Yeah, that's in that eighth house. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and okay, I'm just gonna say a few astrology things to get it off my
Please.
chest, and then we can move on. So yeah, okay, so your ascendant is, I love your ascendant. Oh, it's so sweet. I mean, it's what making us connect right now, and it's what making all your listeners being able to connect to you. Even I do hope that there are others out there like me who don't really understand what you're talking about most of the time, because you would have to have read all of those books. But it's still really pleasant to be around, and that's that
Mm,
Cancer ascendant. So you have Cancer rising, and our rising sign, our ascendant, is about what we are becoming and what we are giving birth to in this life. So yeah, and it's paradoxical because sometimes it has to do with like features of the body, and but actually at a deeper level it's not something that you are necessarily natural in, but your life process is going to take you there. So what you're coming from is emphasized by this. It's also in just because you have a lot of air in your chart, but it's emphasized by that Cancer rising, that you have lived many lives in knowledge, right? Like a walking library, some kind of maybe a wanderer going around and having a lot of network and collecting a lot of knowledge. And then in this life, if you were to continue only doing that, then you would find, okay, my mind gets really, I have a sharp mind, but it gets really overstimulated. I can't rely solely on my mind. I have to also get in touch with the knowledge, get in touch with whatever I meet in life from a more personal place. And that's where the Cancerian energy is now coming in and blooming like it is in your life,
Mm.
and saying, this is me, this is how I connect emotionally, and this is where I belong.
Mhm.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I love the networking with other scholars and whatnot, but it's for me, the collaboration is never just about the ideas. Like I enjoy that personal connection and emotional connection to the people that I work with, and that provides the basis upon which we can geek out about the intellectual stuff. Um, it's very difficult for me to collaborate with anyone if there's not that um, basis of a sort of shared emotional field, like we're friends. Um, and so I think that, yeah, that Cancerian quality has helped me, build bridges theoretically by connecting the ideas, but only because I've been able to connect with the person
Mm.
that I'm working with. And so, um, yeah, it's definitely important to me to connect on both of those levels.
Wonderful. Exactly. Yes. And I feel it. I even thought of maybe doing it with this one, but I can't go against myself like that. I thought of copying the way that you do the interviews, where I've seen interviews where you do this anyway. I don't know if you do it every time, but oftentimes I feel like you just talk with someone and then you press record.
Mhm.
And then we, the listeners, just come into a conversation. It seems like that. It's so natural. It's very Cancerian like that, because it's all
Mm.
about being authentic and natural. And like you said, we're just friends. We're just at home. We don't have to pretend that we're something else. I really like that. I feel it also. Yeah, it's kind of cool as well.
Well, thanks.
Did you dare to
Yeah.
do that? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing this YouTube thing for so long. It does just come natural at this point. And sometimes I throw my guests off and they're like, wait, we're already recording? I was like, yeah, we're just doing that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's it's a good idea to get the best of them, maybe.
Mm.
Okay, so I have one more astrology thing I'd like to share with you, and that's how I felt so compelled to write to you. Um, because I have a lot of Sagittarius as well. You have Saturn there, and you have it in that sixth house of work. And you were talking about investigative journalism before, so that's also a Sagittarian thing.
Mm.
And you know how I combine, obviously, with the name of this podcast, I combine therapy and astrology. And so I see it as different personalities inside of me. And I feel like there was this part of me when I discovered you, this Sagittarian part of me, like maybe I have lived many lives covered in philosophy,
Mm.
soaked
Mhm.
in philosophy. And I was like, whoa, this person, he's living it out. Like he's reaching that full potential. And I was examining myself because I was like, hey, am I jealous? What's going on? Because I'm not a philosopher. So how can I be jealous of, he's something else, right? But I think there's this part that was like recognizing itself, like a soul recognition somehow.
Mm.
How do you feel about that idea?
Um, I feel a resonance with, fire elementally and fire signs. I think, yeah, I do have a couple of planets there. I mean, a lot of us have Pluto there in our generation, but Mars and also. Um, and I feel uh like I guess the way that I do philosophy is maybe I hope more accessible, even if I use words that are unfamiliar, that there's something energetically that gets transmitted at other.
But I'm actually asking you about this soul recognition part of it. I know it's a
Ah,
lot of things, but
hmm
that part I'm curious about. Do you think that's possible? Is it a part of your cosmology? Is it a part of your worldview?
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely think reincarnation is a thing, and we've all lived multiple lives, and we see when we see other people and are drawn to them for whatever reason, it's because of uh, past life resonances. I think it's, how I would understand that. Um, my understanding of reincarnation, though, is a bit unorthodox, I guess, because I don't really see it as like we were each one specific person in the past, but more so in some way we've all been everybody, and that we all inherit from everybody in the past. And maybe, some of us, because of how we come into this particular life, resonate more strongly with particular personalities in the past. But that's not because there's some exclusive connection that we have, to those people in the past. I think it's more so that all of humanity is this network of connections going into the past. And, maybe in this life, you have a more direct connection to certain personalities, and I have a more direct connection, but indirectly, we're all connected. All of the karma is shared, karma is collective. Um, Even if, in this life, I might have a slightly different karmic burden than you have. But it's all a matter of degrees, ultimately for us to advance and evolve as a species. We each have to be willing to take responsibility for everyone. Is one way to put it. But yeah, I think I can't deny those experiences of soul recognition. Um, and it often does seem like I can relate to what you're saying, that we see in others what we wish was more developed in ourselves, maybe,
Yeah,
you know, because we're seeking balance. Like we're all seeking to be that whole
yeah.
that whole person, and we need each other to provide that mirror to allow us to be more whole, to reflect us back to ourselves. And um, so I guess that's part of what you're experiencing, but
Yes, yeah, no, I like it. I like your view. I think it's a good match for what I'm trying to say. Like it's because when I just got conscious about it, I was like, I'm actually not me, Mannah. I wouldn't be able to do that, and I'm not. Yeah, that's not the direction that I've gone in. I did study some philosophy, but I've gone in another direction, right? So what is it? And then I just came to this sense that there's this part of me. We can call that Sagittarian part of me, but even out of the huge Sagittarius archetype, it's just only one potential of it. That is what that I see in you is, that potential is really being reached and it's really being fulfilled. And
mm,
so maybe that part of me was like, like there was this burning desire inside of it, like it was a little person, right? And that's where the therapy comes in, that you can work with it as
mm,
like a real person, and then you can think, why would there be a person in there, right? But that's not the point of therapy. The point of therapy is to heal whatever is going on in there.
mm,
But
mm,
even here, I'm not talking about healing. I'm just talking about that's interesting, right? That there was some part of me that saw really saw you. So it's a compliment and it's something I feel a little mystic as well. Yeah.
mm. I like it. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Mhm.
Can I ask you a question about your practice?
Yes, sure.
Well, tell me about how you first realized that you wanted to bring astrology and therapy together? Because I think that's such a dynamic combination uh, that allows people to gain some perspective on themselves, by understanding their chart and their transits. So yeah, how did you find yourself doing what you do?
Too many experiences with being a client and with therapists who didn't would see me, right? I would feel, yeah, that's right, what you're saying in general, but you're not seeing me. You're not seeing my specific situation. It's unfortunately still like that with therapists. I've just grown better at knowing what's going on there and not being so sensitive about it. But
Mm,
that's why I like the combination, because if then you were to feel I'm not seeing you as a therapist, then we have a chart to refer to. I mean, often the clients don't know astrology, but that's the idea of it, that
mm,
that you are being seen specifically for you, and like you were just saying before, it's a matter of I don't know how you put it, but like nuances, a dosage of how much we have of each. We're all connected, and it's just a matter of how it's placed in a way. That's how I see it in astrology and in your chart. But it's important how it is placed,
mm.
right? It's really significant, even the small changes. So differences, yeah.
Right,
So,
right.
I mean, how I would do therapy with you would be very different than if you were just like a water sun, for example,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, I understand. Um, hmm Yeah, I don't know. What's coming to mind right now is thinking if I were a water sign. Like I always say to people who are afraid they're gonna offend me, like I guess as an Aquarian, it's just very difficult to say something offensive to me. I just like roll with it and like can can respond at a more abstract level and not take it personally, whereas maybe a water sign would take it more personally.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and exactly. I mean, your type could, for example, go to a therapist's office and feel like the therapist would say, "Don't think so much. Don't be too
Right.
abstract. Like, come back into your heart." And that is a point. Like you, for all of us, and especially also for, of course, for the Aquarius archetype, we need to go to the heart. But there's this maybe gets a little too advanced, but there are two things, right? There's the chart and the way that you're living it out now, and then there's the evolutionary process of it. And if I would only tell you, constantly just tell you where you need to go, I'm also missing you where you are right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's holding both as like, yeah, I know, potentially these archetypes can, be lived out really well if we were to go this direction, but also just how glorious it is to see where you are right now. That's fabulous and outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why there's so much symbolism, and I also study tarot symbolism. I
Mm-hmm.
think astrology and why it's obsessed, I feel obsessed by it.
Mm-hmm.
I really love it so much is because I see it in people, right? And it's easy to connect with people.
Right.
So every time I meet a new person and I see a new chart, I feel more love for astrology in a way because I got to see those archetypes in life, alive.
Yeah, no, I share that sense. I always I have a little bit of a struggle with myself when I meet somebody new, whether it's a new friend or a romantic interest. It's like I want to see their chart. Um,
Mm.
but I have to, I struggle because I don't want to let the chart overly determine how I relate to the person. Because like you said, you can live out a chart in so many different ways, but also it's so insightful and helpful and exciting to be able to understand the deeper dynamics going on in a personality and to see the synastry and the connection, how it resonates with my chart. Like um, I've continually, one of the things that has deepened my appreciation for astrology over the years is just how insightful it can be for understanding relationships, understanding other people, in addition to understanding myself. I think once you learn the language, it's impossible not to see how powerful it is. And I know, there are in academic philosophy and like the scientists I talk to, sometimes they Google me and they see that I've talked about and written about astrology, and they are outraged. They get so upset because for them, as Rick Tarnas is always saying, astrology is like the gold standard of superstition in our
Yeah.
intellectual culture.
Mm.
Um, and so, for that reason, and because I don't want to become overly reliant on it to like relate to other people, I have this conflict. But, at the end of the day, I always tell people like, have you actually tried? I mean, maybe you read about your sun sign and you think, oh, that could be true of anyone. Yeah, but go deeper, give it a chance. And you might see that it's tremendously valuable, even if it's just a psychological tool, a
Mm.
language for talking about things that would otherwise be very slippery and difficult to get a handle on. Astrology provides a language for navigating this psychological interpersonal space. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. Of course, it's dangerous to be if you're very fixed in your interpretation, if you feel it is just this way. But like
Mhm.
you were mentioning earlier, that you read someone who's contrary to you, and um, and I feel you do have that obligation once you're in astrology to like just try to open your mind and not have like fixed ideas about people. Um, I mean, because that's when it becomes a barrier in wanting to see people's charts. And that's why a lot of people deny me the honor of seeing their chart. I'm not a fan of that. Yes. But that's because the expectation is that I'm just gonna think, oh, they're this. Oh, it's a Scorpio, and now I think this and that. And the more you study it, it's not like that. It's not. There's so many different variations of that. And I think a red flag is if there's something, some configuration, some aspect, whatever, where you think that's purely bad. You're
Yeah,
not ready. Then you're not ready because it's never only bad. It cannot be. It can always be lived out well.
yeah, yeah, I agree. Hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, the ancients referred to certain planets as malefic and so on, and I feel like, Saturn and Mars, they get this bad rap, but they're so important and so helpful at the same time. So it's important to see the multivalence, that's the word that Rick Tarnas uses, of every archetype, every planet. It has a light and a shadow side.
Right.
Um, and with which side comes out depends on how, we live out our charts.
Yeah.
We have freedom here. We're not just determined by our placements.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. Now I hope I haven't disappointed my listeners in speaking so much.
Well, I've enjoyed it, so
I wanted to hear
they'll
you.
they'll get over it.
Oh, they'll go over it one day. Yeah. Okay, I'm just finding my notes here, but it's too late to get back into the article, I feel. I have to ask you something else. Um, okay, so when we've talked so much about the Cancer archetype and how it's so authentic and resonating with the heart of other people, oneself and other people, what is in your heart these days? What is your desire to philosophize more about?
Hmm. Hmm. That's a great question. Well, I'm always seeking deeper integration and synthesis of parts of myself, but also, between like science and spirituality or religion, and between uh, logic and poetry and art. Like I always want to find the bridge between these things that are considered to be opposed or opposites. And I feel like less compartmentalized than in the past, but I think one of the things I'm striving to do at present is bring together more my interest in and practice of more esoteric forms of spirituality, uh, bring that together with, my study of science and how we understand the biological world and the nature of organisms. And I'm trying my best as a philosopher to be in dialogue with biologists and physicists and understand cutting edge research going on in that domain that's very precise and mathematical. And I don't really have a mathematical brain, but I do my best to keep up with it conceptually. And I see so many connections between that, more scientific and academic understanding and the direction that many researchers are going, which is more holistic, um, and less materialistic. And this esoteric spirituality stuff that I study over here that often is dismissed, even by those more, new paradigm type of scientists. They're still not ready for the deeper, um, spiritual perspectives. But I feel like we need to bring, and I want to participate in helping to bring these two sides back together, the scientific and the spiritual, but in a way that's uh, serious and careful and that doesn't sacrifice the analytical rigor and precision of science, but that also is open to the intuitive and the imaginative, that comes from spiritual experience. And it's, I think more and more people are open to at least having these two sides, but it's like, how do we integrate the two? How do we bring science and spirituality and art back together, reintegrate them? Because I feel like one of the things that's gone haywire in our modern civilization is that, to put it simply, science, art, and religion or spirituality have become separated from each other. And it's not like we just want to mush them together indiscriminately, but I think they need to mutually inform one another, and so much of my effort now feels like an attempt to contribute to that reunification in a way, to heal our culture and our sense of self-understanding, because so many of us are compartmentalized. You know, we in these parts of ourselves need to communicate more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's what I'm trying to do.
Amazing. Amazing. Don't you think that that actually possible with the Pluto in Aquarius, that era? I
I
mean,
think so. Yeah. Yeah. Um, I mean, deconstruction is needed for sure to
mhm.
make way for this new reintegration, but it's a death rebirth process, right? At the level of the collective. And um, maybe that's what this whole Pluto through Aquarius transit's going to be about.
It
And
could be, right? Aquarius science and Pluto psychology or spirituality, the
yeah,
hidden occultism, for example. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Um, so we're just getting started.
Mm.
Uh, and I think, the first part of this transit of Pluto through Aquarius will probably be more so the breakdown, the death, the dying away of what hasn't been working, and then we can rebuild. Uh,
When you speak like that, are you speaking to anything in particular that's happening in your country?
yes.
Yeah, okay. That's a silly question. But anything like, are you thinking about something right now as you're speaking? Because I don't follow the news as closely as you may be doing.
Well, I mean, um, I think Donald Trump is a very uh, powerful force right now that is um, breaking down the institutional norms. And, most Americans agree that the government was broken and inefficient and corrupt. And we disagree about the best way to fix that problem. But Trump is like a wrecking ball, right now, and he's coming in and just uh, firing government employees, thousands, tens of thousands of government employees, and really trying to wipe the slate clean. And in some sense, that's what people voted him in for. I think of him as like a grenade, and people are angry, and they just wanted to lob a grenade into Washington, D.C. and blow it up,
Mm.
and he's blowing it up. And what emerges in the aftermath of that, I think, remains to be seen. Um, I'm personally, I'm not a supporter of Trump, but I think I'm trying to make the best of the situation and see how this is in some ways inevitable. Um, but then, in terms of internationally and foreign policy and the things that he's doing, I think I'm worried about the destabilization of international treaties and norms, and I do worry about things going off the rails a bit, and a major, you know, conflict breaking out. I mean, there are already major wars occurring, but I feel worried that that might spread, and I really hope it doesn't.
Mm.
Um, but Trump is so chaotic
Mm.
that a lot of the rest of the world seems unsure how to respond. And when things get more chaotic, mistakes happen, miscalculations happen, and things can spiral.
Mm.
Um, and so I feel like, yes, what a lot of what I've been speaking about before you ask specifically about the political situation, that's what's in the background. I feel an acceleration of the breakdown
Mm. Okay.
occurring, which needs to occur for something new to be reborn. Yeah,
Yeah, but could it happen in a more gentle way than earlier
I hope
times
so.
where we didn't know as much as we do now? So I know we just I'm keeping track of time, by the way, the the measure of time. But I feel like just asking two questions, a follow up on that. So, what philosophy is? What can you? Where can you reference? Where is your references in when you see this political landscape? Does something come to mind?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think it's helpful to compare our moment now to 100 years ago. Um, in the 1920s and 30s, there were various political philosophies vying for power in Europe and in the US. Fascism, communism, liberalism, those are the three main political philosophies of the modern period. And after World War One, um, if we just zoom in on Germany, Germany got blamed for the war and had to pay all this money to the other nations. And that was unfair because the other nations participated in the war just as much as Germany, but Germany gets blamed. They have economic trouble. Um, the there's a revolution in Germany in 1919 where the socialists and the workers were on the verge of, really taking over the country, uh, just as what was happening in Russia as the Russian Revolution happened. Um, and then things shifted in the late 20s and early 30s into a fascist direction. Um, and I feel like we can learn a lot from that episode in history about our current moment because still 100 years later, we don't really have um, new political philosophies that have a lot of uh, support and following behind them. It's still basically those three: liberalism, communism, or socialism, and fascism. And so I worry about us repeating history in a way. Um, and I think the source of hope or an alternative for me comes mostly out of my study of an esotericist or occultist named Rudolf Steiner. Have you heard of him? Yeah.
Yeah, because you have all of these kindergartens, so you can't really avoid him.
Yes. Yes, that's right. And he's a controversial figure, but he proposed um, this program he called social threefolding, and he tried to institute this in Germany right in this period in the early 1920s, and had some success initially, but the problem was he was trying to avoid taking sides and becoming um, political about it. He wanted to say to the workers, like, yes, you're being exploited by the big corporations, you need more rights, but he also wanted to say that the economy should not be run by the state. It should be run by talented entrepreneurs. And so he was trying to acknowledge the grievances of all of these different classes and sectors of society and avoid just choosing one side and fighting against the other side. And he thought that, you know, there are these three basic spheres in human collective existence. There's the economy, there's the state, and there's cultural life. And for most of the 20th century, and especially today, in the West at least, um, the economy, and particularly capitalist economics, runs everything else. So, in other words, the rich people, the billionaires, and the corporations just buy politicians and they buy their own laws and they commodify culture. And so everything gets subsumed into consumer capitalism, basically. And that needs to be balanced by uh, keeping the economy in its place and allowing cultural life to not just be dominated by the profit motive. Um, Cultural life includes everything from education and science to religion and art and media, like everything we really care about. And so instead of economics being the be all and end all, Steiner would say cultural life should be the be all and end all, and the profits from the economy should feed into the cultural life. And
Mm.
then the state is the domain of rights, where we protect the rights of individuals. Um, and, Steiner would really want to get the state out of trying to micromanage the economy or control the economy too much or to control cultural life too much. And there are ways in which both the right wing and the left wing try to use the state to overly dominate cultural life or to overly dominate the economy. And so Steiner was trying to check that impulse and say, look, just protect the rights of individuals, let the cultural life be free, within regulations, let the economy do its thing. You need regulations to protect the environment and to protect the rights of workers, but the state shouldn't be trying to, in a top-down centralized way, control the whole economy. We know that doesn't work. That leads to food shortages and, all these other problems. And so, he made this proposal that I think is of tremendous relevance to our problems today, but it requires for us to even take it seriously, breaking out of these political forms of groupthink where we get locked into a left-wing perspective or a right-wing perspective, and anybody who's not just agreeing with the leaders that we think are good is then evil. And we need to break out of that type of um, sloganeering and normal political opposition so that we can solve our problems. Um, and whether or not we're capable of that, I'm not sure.
Well, at least I feel like you're pointing to a Plutarian quality that we haven't mentioned, but that is to expose the limitations, right? Because this is, if we've looked at politics, I mean, surely many people have been disillusioned throughout many years with that government um, policies and everything. But now it's like it comes to the surface, right? It's being exposed in a big way where we're like, whoa, is that really what is going on? Well, it is. Now it's not hidden anymore, and then you can kind of see, okay, it's really intertwined in a lot of things in a lot of areas.
That's well said. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just to speak one briefly to the US situation right
Yeah.
now, we have these two major parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. And I think most neutral observers would say the Democratic Party is just as bought out by billionaires as the Republican Party. But what's happening with the Trump administration now is it's coming out into the open more. You can't pretend like that's not the case because Elon Musk is literally running the White House, whereas the Democrats had it slightly more behind the scenes. Now it's just out in the open. And so Trump represents all of this stuff that was in the shadows just bursting out onto the front and center on stage for everyone to see, you know?
World stage. Yeah.
Mhm.
Crazy stuff. So I just have a final question as that follow up from before.
Yeah.
I feel like asking you if you know any. Do you feel like any specific sci-fi movie is symbolizing or representing what we're going through right now?
Hmm.
I don't even know if that's in your repertoire. I just assume with the Aquarius.
Yeah, well, I'm watching a series right now called Severance. Um, that's about people who have some trauma in their lives and they work for a company that can implant a chip that will basically, when they go to work in the morning, the chip turns on and they forget who they are in their normal life and they just have this other persona while they work. And then they clock out at 5 p.m. and go back to their other life. And so there's this compartmentalization happening. And I feel like in many ways that's a description of what we're trying to overcome, to reintegrate ourselves and to not check out. Like we know things, a lot of people have this sense that things are very wrong, but we pretend that that's not the case and we just live out our lives as best we can over here. And I feel like um, Severance is dramatizing that situation and it's helping me see um, and confirming my sense that integrating these sides of ourselves is what's so important. We can't just compartmentalize and repress the stuff we don't like.
Mm.
We have to become whole personalities again, acknowledge our own shadows and look at the shadow of our civilization and our collective life and just integrate it and not be so afraid of the dark.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a big eighth house Pluto lesson for sure. Not be so
Yeah.
afraid of the dark, but face it, like confront it, so it can be transformed, right? And yeah, I'm
Yeah.
also getting just the thought that there are these parts of us. There's also the part who likes the routine of it, who like going to work and everything is right, but it's just familiar. It's just the same day in and day out, and it feels safe. Yeah, so there's that part as well.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And last thing I'll say is I've always had this sense that when you face the shadow, when you face the demons and y you you have the courage not to be afraid, then actually all of the power of that demon or that shadow just falls away. And it turns out that often the demonic, what seems evil, is just needs to be loved.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it softens and it's not so scary anymore.
Mhm.
Um, and that's risky. Sometimes you try to show love to demons and you get swallowed. Not saying it's not risky, but most of the time, I think if we can just confront the shadow, what we thought was so bad and frightening ends up being um, a friend.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yes, absolutely. I love that concept. Even what comes up is like in dreams, that is true. In therapy, that is true. The sides of us that we can, and when I as a therapist, I don't know what to do, go to love, you know, just love on it. That's
Right.
yeah.
When all else fails.
Yes, exactly. It somehow always comes up last in my mind, but it's the winner. Thank you so much, Matthew Segall, for spending this time with us.
Yeah,
Uh,
thank you, Mana. This was a joy. Appreciate your questions and your energy, and hope your listeners enjoyed it as well.
we hope, we can only hope, right? And a big recommendation to footnotes to Plato for sure. A podcast you want to listen to if you want to be enlightened one of these days. Right?